content. All right, welcome back. Fix is live. Here we are on a Thursday. And let's get into a tradition unlike any other. No, not the Masters. John McMullen and the Fix. 7:30 every night right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Make sure you follow John, as always, at JF McMullen on Twitter. PhillyVoice.com and SI.com is where you can find all of John's written work. You can listen to John daily now. New show, Birds 365 with Jody Mack, Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., PhillyVoice.com, JAKIB Media YouTube channel, and then extending the play on Saturdays. This Saturday, John, I believe you are live at 11 a.m., and I'll be lingering around with you Saturday too, so we'll have some fun then.
It's exciting news. Get an extra hour. It's like daylight savings time for us.
There you go. All right, so I don't want to spend too much time on this because I actually already brought it up earlier, but I did bring it up to you during the break there, just about the story regarding the former football player and the mass shooting. I mean, it's Adams, absolutely horrific, kills 5 players and then himself.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrible. Obviously, former NFL player, it's going to be even more publicized than in a normal fashion. Unfortunately, we have too many things like this happening in the country as a whole. But obviously, you have to wait and see. Clearly, there were some issues. Evidently, the family he killed was his longtime doctor. So
yeah.
There's no excuses. But typically, something sets someone off when they do something this horrific, and we'll have to wait and see what the ultimate explanation is, if there is an explanation. I mean, in a lot of ways, when you do something like that, sometimes there is no explanation. I know his agent talked to my buddy Rob Motti for the Associated Press, so he had mentioned he had some depression issues and kind of was having a difficult time moving on from football. And I've heard that a lot, guys, for years and years and years, they play the game and all of a sudden it stops and they don't know how to go back to regular life. But it rarely does it emerge in such horrific, as I said, and dramatic tragedies. So thankfully, these things are rare, and all you can do is hope they stay rare. Yeah,
agreed. And it happens way too often nowadays in society, and not from NFL players, former, whatever it is, and it doesn't matter. It's horrific, but yeah, sports world, obviously, it's going to be picked up here and put out there and talked about even more than it would be normally. So just tragic and horrific. But we'll transition away from the horrific and go to maybe some positives with the Eagles, although, that could be deemed horrific in a different sense. Lane Johnson, John, made his media rounds, it felt like today, and you really had a first stab at him at 8 a.m. on Birds 365. You and Jody spoke with Lane Johnson today, and, I obviously want all the insight on what he had to say. But I will throw this out at you. With the new coaching staff and with the uncertainty of the division and the Eagles and how they're going to look this year through 17 games now, is there a chance that the new coaching staff and Sirianni says, all right, we're going to ride this offensive line, hopefully if they're healthy, and kind of have like the Indianapolis Colts blueprint that they did last year with Phillip Rivers, where it was really just like a run, simplify things, and rely on that strong offensive line? Could we see something like that from Lane Johnson and the coaching staff this year if all those guys are healthy?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about it. Obviously, there's not, as we sit here in April, there's not a lot of high expectations for the 2021 Eagles. And we did have Lane. We also had Zach Berman on as well from The Athletic, and I actually asked Zach this. And, if there, and he agreed, if there is a surprising sort of run, if this team overachieves, if this team is a lot better than people think they are, it's going to come down to the offensive line and to a certain degree the defensive line as well. But, I mean, Lane is the best right tackle in football when he's healthy. Brandon Brooks is, if he's not the best right guard, he's right there with Zach Martin when he's healthy. We all know Jason Kelsey, 3 consecutive years as an All-Pro. Isaac Seumalo was solid, and I think you'll have competency at left tackle, whomever wins the competition between Andre Dillard and Jordan Mailata. And that's pretty good. But it's also a lot of ifs when you're talking about over 30 guys coming off significant injuries. And that's what you're talking about with both Lane and Brandon. In the case of Brandon Brooks, he's coming off 2 Achilles tears in 3 seasons, so less than 3 seasons. So that's a concern. And then, Lane said he's about a month away from being fully cleared from essentially significant ankle surgery. He tried to do a sort of Band-Aid surgery at first and tried to play through it, and it just didn't work. And he's described it as the inside of his ankle collapsing. So that's pretty significant. I think we have to see what Lane Johnson shows up, if he's the same guy. But, I mean, if those guys are healthy and playing 16 games, yeah, that's by far the best right side in football. And again, when you expand it out to the left side, not quite as good, but easily top 10 in the league. If those 5 guys can play together for an entire season, but we're just coming off a year where the Eagles set an NFL record for different offensive line groups starting games. I mean, that's how bad it was. And the second group, and I talked to Lane about this, the Mailatas of the world, and people look at Jack Driscoll, Nate Herbig, and guys like that. They really started to develop as the season wore on. But while I say that, they're not Lane Johnson and Brandon Brooks. I mean, they got a chance to be good players, but they're not going to be like all pro players in the conversation for the best player in the entire league at their position. And that's what Lane and Brandon are when they're right.
Yeah, and we know when they're right lately has just been a huge, big if. But what did Lane have to say about his buddy Brandon Brooks, who had his second torn Achilles in 3 years, only playing 7 games? And listen, you bring it up all the time here over the past couple years that Brandon Brooks is quite literally a superhero alien, and just his athleticism and what he's been able to do coming back from injuries. But at some point, man, and this isn't a knock, he's human. At some point, this has to take a toll and catch up with him. I hope that's not the case. But what did Lane have to say about that? And you can add your thoughts.
Yeah, and real quick, Lane was the one who played only 7 games. Brandon didn't play at all.
That's right.
He tore his Achilles in June. And if you remember, he came back to practice in week 17. And everybody said, why did the Eagles do that? What's the point? They were obviously, at the time, with only 4 wins, and you say, why are you wasting your time? He's not going to play. And it's because Brandon wanted it. He wanted to prove he can do it. And that's sort of the mentality he has, always fighting, always trying to beat the predictions and the rehab sort of timetables, and he did it again. The interesting thing is obviously the Eagles aren't going to be playing anytime soon. We're a long ways off from September, but I mentioned Lane is a month away from being cleared. Brandon's cleared. Brandon's ready to go. The question is, because of the timing, obviously, of his injury, it's been almost a year. The last time it took him about 8 months to come back. But you do have that concern because he is such a big guy. And the interesting thing is, and I don't know if you remember the social media pictures, because Brandon, would put up when he's working out, he's one of those guys that goes on social media. And, I mean, he lost a lot of weight and was ripped to shreds. He was like a WWE star. That's what he was looking like, body-wise. Now, he did that because it's tough to, rehab an Achilles when you're weighing 340 pounds. So he got down probably to 270, 280. And, it was in phenomenal shape. But the question is, if you think about Brandon as a player, well, his strength is he's stronger than everybody else. I mean, he's just the old school, scout term road grader. I mean, he would just blow people off the line of scrimmage. He was incredibly powerful. And the question is, can he play at 340 on two Achilles tears, essentially? Now, they're healed, but as we saw, when you tend to rehab an Achilles, same thing happened to Jason Peters. People forget that. He tore his Achilles, he came back, and he tore his Achilles again on the other side. If you sort of, when you're coming back, obviously you favor the one side, and that makes you more susceptible. And so it has to be a concern. And I don't want Brandon Brooks playing at 280. I know he can get down there. I know he can look like a bodybuilder, but he's not going to be the same player at 280. So a lot of questions, other than, when these guys are right, they're great, but you got to be realistic about it as well. And generally, when you start to be injury prone in the NFL, when you're in your 30s, it generally doesn't get better, if you're going to be honest.
No, it doesn't. It's a brutal sport, and if you can never get back to 100% physically and even mentally to go along with those injuries, it's tough to get back into that right spot, so to speak. Did Lane have anything to say about, you bring up Driscoll and Jordan Mailata and Pryor, and we talk about the Eagles' probability of taking an offensive tackle, John, at 12 overall. What did Lane have to say about those guys, just not related to the 12th overall pick, but then I'll add, who's the odd man out if they do go Vera Tucker, and, do they try and trade one or two of those guys that I mentioned?
Well, I do think if they would draft an offensive lineman, they'd probably try to trade Andre Dillard, probably try to get, maybe a fourth-round pick back if they drafted somebody in the first round. More like, it's not going to happen, but if Sewell dropped to him, even Rashawn Slater, more natural tackle. Ultimately, I think Vera Tucker would be best suited inside at guard, and he could play. He could play left tackle. That's the beauty of him. I've compared him to Zach Martin because he can play so many different positions. So you could put him basically anywhere other than center. He's probably going to be pretty successful. So I do think Andre Dillard in that instance would be the odd man out. And a major reason for that is, look, Jordan Mailata proved that he could play both sides. And if you're going to be the backup swing tackle, you got to play both sides. And we know from his rookie season, Andre Dillard didn't like playing the right side at all. And that was where the Eagles had some disappointment with him, that in the fact that he didn't try to fight through it. Look, you expect somebody not to be comfortable when they're doing something for the first time, but you do expect them to fight through it, and they didn't do it. But it is a new coaching staff, although Jeff Stoutland is one of the few holdovers. But as a whole, Lane, kind of mentioned it was the silver lining of all the injuries. And, certainly in Mailata's instance, it really ramped up his development. And he mentioned from where he started to where he finished, there was a lot of improvement. And Jack Driscoll, as a rookie, to get reps, it's just really important. But as I mentioned, those guys get a chance to be good players. I don't think they have a chance to be Lane Johnson or Brandon Brooks players. So there's a big difference.
John, what can you tell us about the nearly 150 draft prospects who are in Indy for in-person medical exams and physicals? This is somewhat of a new or revised type of situation due to the pandemic, if I'm not mistaken. Can you fill us in there and the impact?
Yeah, it's not new. It's just done in a different way. It's
Right.
because of the pandemic. It's because there was no combine. You know, people don't realize. Well, some people don't realize that the most important part of the combine is the medical evaluation part, and you know, where all the teams get to, so to speak, kick the tires on all the prospects and see where they are physically. And obviously, when they canceled that, they made it paramount that they had to get certain people in for those medical evaluations because of their histories of surgeries and so forth. So it's a really, really important part of the process, and this is far more important than any of the pro days that we made fun of for weeks and any of the 4-3s. This is the real stuff that, you know, NFL teams have that all the draft people on social media do not have and do not have access to this information. And there's so many players, and DK Metcalf is a perfect example of this. And I talk about it all the time. Most NFL teams have draft boards. Like, you'll see these draft guides and these draft sites, and they'll grade 400 prospects. You know, the vast majority of those guys aren't even on an NFL team's board. Every board is, you know, most teams are about 150, get it down to 150 of people they could potentially select or sign as an undrafted free agent. I always tell the story. Nick Cesario, I think it was 2017 or 2018, when the Patriots didn't have a ton of picks. Their draft board was 75 players. That's it. 75 players. That's how finely tuned they had it down to people that they potentially wanted to bring into their program. And a guy, you know, the people who kill the Eagles and say, how could you not take DK Metcalf? You know, he was not on a lot of many teams' boards because of health concerns and because of issues he had in the past. And I think a lot of people don't realize that.
I saw Trevor Lawrence will not be one of those players that is getting medically evaluated, and you know, he has a good reason. He's getting married. So congrats to Trevor Lawrence. But what does that mean? Is that something, nothing? I'm sure Jacksonville's done their due diligence, but fill us in.
Yeah, it's nothing because Trevor's different. He's going number one, sort of. He had his own pro day. He had his own pro day, interestingly, because he had surgery scheduled. So they wanted to make sure they did it for him before he was scheduled to get his surgery, which is on his non-throwing arm. So it's not a big concern. Jacksonville is well aware, and obviously, you know, it's interesting. They put together his pro day, by the way, so that'll tell you what's going on with the Jaguars. And you know, there's been this late push of, you know, maybe Urban Meyer will take Justin Fields. And the only reason Urban Meyer's in the NFL is because he got a shot at getting Trevor Lawrence. And, you know, most scouts, and I talked to one of them, Matt Manjarian, on Birds 365 earlier this week, you know, this is the best quarterback prospect in NFL personnel people's minds since either Andrew Luck, and some people say all the way back to John Elway. Wow. So, I mean, he's going number one overall. I wouldn't be concerned about that.
What's the latest on Zach Ertz, John? We haven't gotten into Ertz in a little while, so let's dive back into that for a minute.
Yeah, Lane talked about him as well. You know, not anything earth-shattering, but he did mention that he has talked to him numerous times in the offseason, and he did admit that Zach expected to be traded, which, you know, we've been reporting for weeks. And I don't think he's happy that he's not been traded, which I've also been reporting for weeks. Ultimately, I think he'll get traded probably draft weekend, and probably attached to a pick if the Eagles want to go up in the draft, maybe target a player. And then I think Howie can sort of spin it as getting value in return for a player that's been an all-time Eagles great. But in a lot of ways, it's status quo in the fact that Zach wants outs. The Eagles want value. Basically, have wanted a third-round pick. People aren't going to give a third-round pick for Zach Ertz coming off a bad year with a big contract. And I think, they're in a position of strength, and Howie's playing hardball, and Zach's not happy about it. So it's pretty much status quo.
Wow. So, I mean, I understand he had, a down year, but a third pick, he's not even worth a third pick. So what do you think the trade is going to look like?
I mentioned, probably, for instance, if, the Eagles got that fourth-round pick back, if they're in the fourth round, maybe the third round, but more likely the fourth round, and they want to go way up, like 20 spots or something of that nature, then they attach Zach Ertz to that fourth-round pick, and they'll probably be able to do something like that, depending on the team. The problem from Zach's camp is, we're deep in the free agency now. Obviously, it's a trickle. She saw the Eagles get some cost-effective signings yesterday, and that's really what's left because most teams have budgeted and signed the players they wanted to sign, and now are waiting for the draft, and they'll see how the draft shakes out, and then you'll have that sort of third wave of free agency. If you go back to, the Eagles Super Bowl season, so think of it as the LeGarrette Blount phase, when you don't get something you wanted in the draft, and you look at what's left at a particular position and bring a guy in. That's sort of where we are. So, it's difficult to add Zach's salary, and when you've already budgeted and probably already set up your position. So I think, Lane had mentioned today that he's hopeful Zach returns. And, maybe the Eagles try to go back to him and say, look, you're under contract and let's play out this 1 year and then you're a free agent and you can go wherever you want. Maybe I would say it's still very unlikely, but, I probably would have gave that like a 5% chance of happening. Now I'm more in the 20% range. So it is increasing a little bit.
Wow, that's interesting. Something to keep an eye on, and we'll obviously have you updated there for anything that comes of Zach Ertz and the Philadelphia Eagles. John, you mentioned Fields a little bit earlier in this conversation, not too long ago, but a second pro day. Thoughts on that? That's not something that you see too often every year.
No, it's weird. Fields has been sort of probably the most schizophrenic of the quarterback prospects. What people think about Lawrence, what people think about Wilson, even Mac Jones. With Justin, it's people love him. There's certain people that think he should be the first pick in the draft, and there's others who say he can't get past his first progression. He's going to have difficulty at the next level. And, one of the things that, unfortunately, Dan Orlovsky took some hits for, reporting what other people said, which I'll never understand. And he shouldn't have apologized, and that was even a bigger mistake. But nonetheless, that's where we are in the world. That's what certain people think of him. And the fact, I think he's trying to change that narrative and saying, no, I'm a hard worker, I'm competitive here. look at it. I want to throw for you. I don't know if it's to win over certain people, but ultimately, I think it's going to be, for the first time ever, I think it's going to be quarterback, 1 through 4. And I don't think Fields is getting past 4. And I don't necessarily know if it'll be Atlanta, but if it's not, the Falcons will trade out for somebody who wants them.
All right, we just have about a minute and a half here, so just quickly before I let you run, Justin Herbert, 6 overall last year in the draft, so by no means was he overlooked, but it was Joe Burrow, 1A, and then you got a lot of Tua talk, and Herbert was, third in conversation, so who could be a Herbert in this draft? Like, we've talked about Mac Jones a lot, but, outside of Lawrence and maybe even Fields, which one of these quarterbacks, Wilson I know is getting a lot of traction lately, and number 2 overall certainly isn't overlooked, but which one of these quarterbacks could be a Herbert type of player where, wow, he wasn't even, he wasn't Lawrence or Fields, and he's having a hell of a year, and he's going to be something for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, it's tough to say. 6 is still pretty high.
Right.
That's where the Eagles were. So it's not like people didn't like Justin Herbert, but I think it's pretty clear he should have went number 1 overall. He just has, and Joe Burrow's a heck of a player. And obviously you're concerned with the injury, but Herbert just has more physical skills. He's just better physically. And he hit the ground running. I think he's going to be a superstar in this league for a really, really long time. And it's always about, what you like, and it's always about the flavor. And I do think you said, and that's what Matt Manchurian said as well. He said, to me, and I said, who are those? I asked him, who are those tier 2 quarterbacks? So after the top 5, he said, well, to me, tier 1 is Trevor Lawrence, and then tier 2 is Zach Wilson and Justin Fields, and so forth and so on. So, again, I set Trevor Lawrence apart. But if you're asking me of the top guys, who's got the chance to be as good as Justin Herbert? Yeah, nobody. He's better than all of them. That's second tier. Yeah, he's better in my estimation. He's going to be a better pro quarterback than those other 4. I don't know about Lawrence. Lawrence
scares
have
me.
A hole from a trait standpoint, but everybody else, Herbert's better.
Yeah, and we're pretty much out of time here, but I will add, Lawrence scares me, just from the injury standpoint, and I don't know how much stronger he's gonna get, and maybe he's not injury prone at all, and he has a healthy, successful career. But just right now, it does scare me a little bit that he could be one of those guys that just can't seem to get off the sideline and out of a cast, so to speak.
Well, all I can say is what the scouts have been saying, and they say, look, there's no such thing as a can't-miss player. But, once you grade somebody that highly, you feel pretty comfortable about it. So that's what people kind of think of Lawrence. But injuries could derail anybody. We just saw it with Carson Wentz.
Yep.
They could derail anybody.
Yes, they can. John McMullen never getting derailed. Always fights through injuries. Follow John at JF McMullen on Twitter, PhillyVoice.com, SI.com, Birds365, extending the play on Saturdays. All right, John, we're way over here. We'll do it again tomorrow, man. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Ron.
Yep, there he is, Johnny Buck. Good stuff, as always. All right, let's get to the break.
The middle.
You can't have pigs in a blanket followed up by filet mignon, followed up by peach cobbler. It's too much. It's too out of control.
Are you kidding me?
There needs to be a sense of chocolate.
I don't know who this person is.
Filet mignon with Crown Royale.
Vanilla ice cream and apple pie? You might as well just kick somebody in the groin.
The Middle with Eitan Shander, Barrett Brooks, and Harry Mays. Weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern.